healthy, and sweet new year. Israel lives in a very dangerous neighborhood. Doesn't get to choose what is one issue or another. You just look at the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. You look at the countries that border around Israel and their issues. You don't need to go very much further beyond those countries to see even more issues, all of which pose a threat, a grave threat to Israel. Gadi Eisenkot, who is the Chief of Staff of the Israel Defense Forces, speaking in Israel last January, identified the greatest threat to Israel as Iran. I'm going to extend that and talk about it on 3 different levels. Because it's Iran as a supporter and sponsor of proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas. It is Iran as a regional hegemon. We've seen Iran now in control or in manipulation of 4 capitals, from Syria to Lebanon to Yemen and Iraq. Gadi Eisenkot went further and said, because of the Iran deal, a nuclear Iran threat has been pushed off for potentially 10 years. The #1 threat, according to Gadi Eisenkot, is those proxies, Hezbollah. When I was in Congress, I served on the Foreign Affairs Committee. It was an honor to do so. I am proud that one of the pieces of legislation that I co-authored in Congress, the Hezbollah International Finance and Prevention Act, became law. And today, for the first time, we are placing sanctions on Hezbollah, who has 150,000 rockets pointed at Israel. Israel is, as was said before, our most important ally in a very dangerous region, perhaps our most important ally in the entire world. I will go back to Congress and serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee to make sure Israel has the resources she needs to defend herself by herself and to take on the threat of Iran and the proxies of Hamas and Hezbollah, and the threats of regional hegemon, and ultimately long-term to make sure Iran never, ever, ever gets a nuclear weapon, not in 15 years of this deal or beyond, any time beyond that.
Thank you, Congressman.
When I first decided to run for Congress, a very good friend pulled me aside and he said, Bob, I'm a one-issue voter. I care about Israel. He says, I know you're going to vote the right way, because oftentimes it's easy to vote on an Israel motion that passes the House with over 400 votes. He said, but what are you going to use your precious few minutes on the floor talking about? Will you stand up? Will you speak out for Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship? I assured him that I would. The very first speech on the floor that I did when I first came to Congress was talking about the threat of Iran, not only to the United States, but to our one true ally, Israel. The deal that was recently agreed to, I think, will haunt us for generations. It was a bad deal then, it's a bad deal today. Frankly, I spoke out about it immediately. I wrote an op-ed in the Chicago Tribune saying this is a bad deal. Bob Menendez said, if our goal is to try to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon, this deal all but ensures them the path to a nuclear weapon. We don't have anywhere, anytime inspections. In fact, we have an inspections regime which is sure to fail. And we're going to get over $100 billion going into the world's greatest state sponsor of terror. Funneling dollars into Hezbollah and Hamas, into Assad in Syria, into terrorist organizations that not only want to disrupt what's going on in Israel, but want to target the United States as well. And so as we look at the biggest issue that's out there, no question it's about the Iran deal. The 10th District deserves someone that is going to be an unwavering advocate, that is going to speak on the floor and is not going to allow politics to get in the way. There are so many other issues that are out there, whether it be the growing delegitimization of Israel, the rise of anti-Semitism, the BDS movement that's going on. I'm a proud author of legislation that is going to put in anti-BDS legislation to make sure that we can tackle this problem in the United States. I ask for your help and your support and your vote on November 8th.
It's an important issue facing your district. And how would you cultivate bipartisan support to address that issue?
Thank you. I think the most important issue now is no different than when I ran the first time 4 years ago. It's our economy and getting an economy that's working for everybody, not just the fortunate few. An economy that's growing from the middle out, helping middle-class families achieve their dreams, put a roof over their heads, provide education and health care to their children, and secure a dignified and secure retirement. We have seen over the last number of years efforts in Congress as well as efforts here in Illinois, to try to change the system or balance the budget on the backs of those who suffer the most, while giving the benefits to those who have the most. In fact, a recent study estimated that the current proposal, Republican proposal for tax reform, would give 99.6%. Let me repeat that, 99.6% of the benefit to the top 1% of people, of earners in this country. That's not the way we're going to grow our economy. So my goal in Congress is to work with my colleagues, again, on both sides of the aisle, to help small businesses. In addition to the Foreign Affairs Committee, I served on the Small Business Committee, helping businesses gain access to capital, access to talent, and giving them policies that would hopefully provide the confidence to invest in the future. Buy a piece of equipment, hire one more people. There are 29 million small businesses in this country. If each one had the confidence to hire one person every 4 years, each president would add 30 million jobs to our economy. We need legislation that's going to reform our tax system to make us competitive globally, but also more fair. We can't have companies like GE who are paying oftentimes 0% in taxes, and companies like Kraft here in Illinois who are typically paying 30%. We need tax reform that's going to level the playing field and provide all of our businesses. I was proud again on the Small Business Committee to be a voice for small businesses to make sure they had the chance to succeed. That's how we're going to grow our economy and get to where we need to be. Thank you.
I am one of those small business owners. I don't sit on the Small Business Committee, I sit on the Ways and Means Committee, the most powerful committee in the United States Congress. Deals with all tax policy, trade, Medicare, Social Security, and the like. As the only small business owner in this race that meets a budget and a payroll, what I hear from people all the time, the biggest issue is jobs in the economy. And you know what, there's some people out there that want to say, you know what, we have an unemployment rate that's at 4.9%. Well, I have news for you, it's not 4.9%. It's not 4.9% in the 10th district. Go up to Waukegan, 43% of African American males are unemployed. That's a crime. 52% of working adults in North Chicago are unemployed. We need to talk about how do we allow the small business owners to be able to hire that next individual. There are 29 million small businesses in our nation, and if we can create an environment that enables half of them to create a single job, think about where we'd be then. But what I hear from many of these small businesses is we have so many roadblocks that are in front of us. More regulation after more regulation after more regulation. And we're not against regulation. In fact, we want regulation. We want it to be smart regulations and tailored regulations. These small businesses want certainty. And so for the first time in a long time, with broad bipartisan support, we were able to allow small businesses to say, yes, you're going to be able to expense that equipment. And we're going to be able to give you that certainty, as opposed to what Congress has done in the past, pass a bill in the 11th hour saying, we're going to give you 2 weeks of certainty and make a tax bill retroactive to January 1st. Well, I don't know about you, but in my small business, we don't budget retroactively. We don't plan retroactively. We actually have to focus on these things. Education is another critical component. Frankly, education is the building blocks for everything that we want to do. And as we look at what's going on, things like Youth Build, was able to work with Youth Build, work with John Lewis, trying to make sure that robust funding's out there for young people to get retrained. This is the way forward. Tax reform, I'm delighted to be able to work on it, but it's only going to pass with effective bipartisan leadership. The type of leadership that I provide. Thank you.
Thank you. Particular issue. We'll begin with Congressman Dold. Congressman Dold, please tell us about your plans for addressing education and student debt in the next Congress.
Well, thank you for the question. Education is literally the building blocks for everything that we want to do in our country. And I will tell you that we have a student loan debt, $1.3 trillion. It's more than credit card debt today. But what I think the 10th District deserves is they deserve a thoughtful, independent, and an effective leader. Someone that's going to work across the aisle and come up with positive solutions to the biggest challenges of our day. For the first time in 14 years, we have a new education bill. It passed the House with 359 votes that takes power away from the federal government and empowers mom and dad. It empowers local school boards to be able to innovate, which is exactly what we need. In that bill, I was proud to offer an amendment that came actually from my Educational Advisory Board. Right now, Illinois is the only state in the union that actually takes Title I dollars And if the school board decides to spend those Title I dollars to hire a teacher, it taxes them 36%. Well, we passed out of the House overwhelmingly a bill to eliminate that problem. It got taken out in the Senate, so we're going to continue to fight on it. Another bill that I authored was the Help for Students and Parents Act, which says, in essence, when you have a student loan, we're going to allow the employers to help pay down that loan. We're going to give them a tax incentive to do so because we want them to pay down that loan and we want them to get out of debt as quickly as possible. But I want to, before we go, talk about another issue, and that's gun control. As a Republican, I'm proud of my record to stand up. Stand up with Gabby Giffords and helped author or co-sponsor legislation on universal background checks. Stood up with Debbie Dingell to talk about zero tolerance for domestic abusers, to say if indeed you're in a domestic abuse situation, you can't purchase a handgun. Because we know that if there's a handgun involved, chances of death go up 5 times. I also stood up with 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats to offer additional legislation on top of a piece of legislation talking about no fly, no buy. We need thoughtful, independent leadership if we are going to move this thing forward, and I am proud to be that leader for you. I ask for your help, I ask for your support, more importantly, I ask for your vote on November 8th.
Thank you. As many of you know, if you watched our primary, I'm named after my great uncle, who was murdered in 1942 when an assailant walked into his office, shot him 4 times, called the police, and sat and waited as my uncle bled to death. For me, this is not about politics. It is truly, truly a personal issue. My first speech when I got to Congress was about gun violence, calling for universal background checks, for a ban on assault weapons, making trafficking of guns across state lines a federal crime, but also saying we have to address the mental health issues, because as you, I'm sure, know, nearly 2/3 of the people who will die this year from gun violence will take their own lives. We have to do something about gun violence, so I was proud to be part of a group that introduced the most broad legislation we've ever seen in our country to tackle some of the challenges of gun violence, addressing the issues I just talked about. But that bill never made it onto the floor of the House for one simple reason. The NRA and the gun lobby are able to take control, and the Speaker of the House is able to deny the victims of Newtown, the victims of gun violence all across the country, the chance for their representatives to take a simple up or down vote to pass legislation that will start to tackle the challenges that are affecting communities across our country. No fly, no buy is a great example. Last year, after the attack in San Bernardino, we tried to bring attention to the fact that someone on the terrorist watch list can today walk into a gun store and easily buy a gun. The no fly, no buy bill would make that more difficult.